Okay, we're here for another Breakthrough Marketing Secrets interview. On the line, I have Chandler Bolt from Self Publishing School. And before we get into the bio and all of that, Chandler, I want to ask you a question. I have a controversial opinion. You're like a self-publishing guy. Hey, publish a book guy, write a book guy. If I'm selling business to business, B2B books pretty much always make terrible products. Am I wrong? Am I right? Why? And prove it. These are the proven direct response marketing, copywriting, and entrepreneurship success strategies you can use today to write your own ticket and create the life you want. I am Roy Furr, and this is Breakthrough Marketing Secrets. Now, here's today's breakthrough.
Yeah. So the premise is B2B books make horrible books.
Horrible products.
Horrible products. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I going to make a fortune? Am I going to make a fortune publishing a B2B book?
Yeah. I think I think you're wrong. And I think the reason would be, actually, I think you're probably mostly right. The way most people do them. And I think the way that I would do it is write to the decision maker on pains that they have and promises that they're interested in. And so I would write a B2B book to the decision maker that teaches core concepts and methodologies, that handles objections directly for my product. Okay.
But you're okay. So here's my argument. And I guess some context that I didn't prep you with before the out of left field question. You're not making a whole bunch of money selling books to the decision makers. The key is that it's a business card that sometimes you get paid for.
Yes.
And it is, in that sense, the best business card someone can have.
Oh, no doubt. And I would ship, B2B. I mean, the beauty there is that you probably have a high average order value, which means you can spend money to acquire customers. And so I would in some variation, I mean, it's kind of like a lumpy mail type thing from the copywriting world. So but I would send physical books to all of the decision makers at all of my target companies.
Yes. Like you send out these nice physical books published, The Proven Path from Blank Page to 10,000 Copies Sold, which, by the way, is brand new this week. Now, I'm going to do your little bio here, Chandler. So I met Chandler in 2014 at the Titans of Direct Response event, which was huge event, like it's biggest event in the decade in the marketing world. And pretty much everybody who was there, not just the people on stage, is a Titan in their own right, or was on the path to becoming a Titan in their own right. And so Chandler is a great example of one of those attendees. So he's an investor, the CEO of Self Publishing School and selfpublishing.com. He's on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, and he's the author of 6 best-selling books, including his most recent book titled Published. Self Publishing School is an Inc. 5000 company for the last 3 years, actually in a row. And so it's one of the 5,000 fastest growing private companies in the United States. He's also the host of the 7-Figure Principles podcast and the Self Publishing School podcast. And through his books, podcasts, YouTube channels, Self Publishing School, he's helped thousands of people write a book that grows their income, their impact, and their business. Now, I want to flip this on its head. And one of the things that I do for guests is I say, what are some softball questions and you gave like, why should we write a book, all of that. But I do want to speak specifically within the context of where we started, right? We started about like business to business books, like growing your business through a book. So what is the role of building of a book in building your business? So if you have maybe an expert business, a client business, some kind of service business, solopreneur, copywriter, marketing consultant, agency, like you have a business, what's the role of a book in building that?
Yeah. So it's a great question, Roy. So I look at using a book to grow a business in 3 specific ways. There's a lot of ways to do it, but I look at it kind of in 3 buckets. So I look at, how do you use a book to get more leads? How do you use a book to get more sales? And then how you use a book to get more referrals? So more leads, these are people who haven't heard of your business before hearing about your book. So think Russell Brunson, Expert Secrets, Traffic Secrets, all those books. A ton of people had never heard of ClickFunnels. They heard of those books. They read those books. Now they know about ClickFunnels. They know about the methodologies, and they're turning into a believer. So these are people who hear about you because of your book. Then the
Yes.
second piece is how do you get more sales? So I look at that as how do I use a book within the funnels that I have and the sales mechanism. So whether it's boosting traffic to lead rate, lead to call or sales consultation booked, show up rate, close rate, et cetera. So these are people who hear about you, who now do business with you, or who are more likely to do business with you because you have a book. The root word of authority is author, and you can't spell the word authority without author. So that helps throughout the process, throughout the sales process. But then also the third piece is referrals, and I can go way deeper into all these things. But I'm a big fan of giving 1 or 2 copies to either every new prospect. It kind of like that. That's the widest net that you could cast.
Yes.
But at a minimum, every new customer, and you say, here's one book for you, and here's one book for someone you know who needs help with XYZ. And you just turn you turn customers into active referrers. So they would never hand your business card out, but they might hand your book to someone who they said, oh, you're thinking about writing a book. Like, you should check out this book. That's just my example, right? You can insert whatever that is for your listeners.
Absolutely. And I mean, it gives them a conversation point too. So you're probably generating referrals even without the second book.
Yes.
Because it's a far more common question to say, oh, have you read any good books recently versus did you buy any new programs or have you hired a new ad agency or something? Like, yeah, okay, maybe there are some contexts where those other questions make sense, but people are talking about the books that they're reading all the time. Like, people like me are popping authors on podcasts and saying, hey, let's talk about the topic of your book. Let's talk about that. So there's opportunities for referrals there. And honestly, you talked about sales. Like, I completely agree. And I love the buckets that you have here. You talk about sales, and it's a book, and I've said this over and over again, a book is one of the best possible acquisition products because it has a high perceived value. It's like a known quantity versus like if you're selling courses or consulting or services or whatever.
Yeah.
Those are much less known quantities, but this is like a packaged thing, right? Like, Chandler is going to send me the book in the mail. Like, I have the Copywriter's Guide to Getting Paid. It's a book that, like, I can send that in the mail and people know, okay, I have an idea of what that is. Yeah. And it makes it like, whether you're using it to generate leads or sales, like it's a huge acquisition piece for introducing people. And I mean, arguably the audience that would be readily able to buy, you mentioned Russell Brunson, the like traffic secrets, expert secrets, .com secrets, like the audience that's ready to buy that is so much bigger than the audience ready to buy ClickFunnels.
Yes.
And so it's like, that's one of the magic ingredients. Like, having a book was one of the magic ingredients in the rapid growth of ClickFunnels, because he was able to acquire people through something that wasn't just software compared to software that has to do that. So that's cool. So isn't it hard to write a book though? Is it?
It is. I would say it's simple, but it's not easy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it is a difficult process. And that's the thing, is a lot of people, a lot of people make it more complicated than it needs to be. So for me personally, I'm a C-level English student and a college dropout with ADHD. So kind of the last person you would ever think to write a book. And so, but that's why I'm a big fan of making complicated concepts simple. And so when I look at writing a book, I look at, I call this the more writing method. And so it's more is an acronym. So it says the first step. And so if you're listening to this, if you're watching this right now and you're thinking, hey, maybe I have an idea or something I could write about. What I'd love for you to do is, as soon as you finish listening to this or watching this, grab a blank sheet of paper, printer paper. We've got a mind map template. This is a spoiler alert, but that you can use as well. But and draw a circle in the middle, put your book topic, and then spend 15 minutes writing out everything that you can think of on that topic. So, which, by the way, if you're writing sales letters, if you're creating talks, if you're doing anything else, the same process works unbelievably well. But so you got your topic, then you've got stories that I have, lessons that I've learned, books that I've read, broken record conversations that I've had with clients or prospects. So really what you're doing is creating the mind map. So that's what the M stands for, is mind map. The O in more stands for outline. So you're turning your mind map into an outline. So then once you've take 15 minutes and create your mind map, then you're going to turn your mind map into an outline. So you'll start to group groups of ideas. So we'll call this 5 groups of ideas, probably is kind of give or take, but those groups are really sections. And so now that forms the sections for your book. And then you'll drill down about 3 chapters per section. So now all of a sudden you've got about a 15 chapter outline. So you've got mind map, outline, the R stands for rough draft. And so the way that you do that is you start with chapter 1 and you do the same thing again. So you go mind map everything you can think of on that chapter, outline the chapter, and then write the chapter and repeat that process chapter by chapter by chapter. This is a group full of writers, so I would assume that's the preferred method. Some people like the speaking method better. So if you speak better than you write, then that can be helpful. And so mind map, outline, speak, and then you repeat that process chapter by chapter by chapter. And then the last piece is the editing. So that's the more writing method is mind map, outline, rough draft. So most important thing is to get your rough draft done and then move into the editing.
Yeah. And so like that speaking, you could even use R for record.
Yes.
And in fact, I will admit to being the writer who was guilty of writing my first drafts of my books as actually spoken, like I spoke them right. But then I put a lot more work into editing and making sure that because one of the biggest challenges as a writer, and this certainly applies to writing books, is how to fill up that empty page, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is wonderful because you're not challenging yourself to fill the empty page with prose, right? With finished prose. You're challenging yourself to be like, just put stuff down and then organize it. And then, put stuff down on the mind map, organize it, get that rough, whatever it is, however you get the rough draft on paper. And then it's usually much easier to edit something than to write it for the first time.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. When I would say you're not the writer that's guilty of doing it. I think you're the writer that's smart for doing it, because if you can speak it and you're a better editor than, because you know this from just writing tons of copy over the years, those are different skill sets, like the first draft of writing and versus the editing, and maybe you like it or are better at that second piece. And so if you can speak well and you don't skip the mind map outline, well, then now you've got a rough draft that you can spend more of your time editing and making better versus feeling like you're spending all this time going from 0 to rough draft.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of jumped ahead and skipped my next question. How can you shortcut the book writing process? But if there are any aspects to this, maybe that weren't already included in that more breakdown. Yeah. Do you have any other tips that help me put great content into my book to shortcut the process?
Yeah. Two or three tips.
Okay.
Here. And the good news is that this is inherent for, I know the majority of folks listening to this or watching this are copywriters. So you're used to writing in some capacity. And so that's the good news. This is inherent. You guys already think in hooks, you already think in story, you already think in, it's really a book is just a big, long sales letter. And there's a lot of fundamental, I started out in copywriting in a lot of ways, and that's what taught me to write better books, because you write more engaging books that, I always say, this is not directly answering your question, but I always say it's like the chapters are kind of your enemy as an author, because that's a chance for someone to put the book down and never pick it up again. And so there's, how do you keep people reading from the next chapter into the next chapter? And then how do you open loops early in the book and then open and close loops? And so there's all kinds of, I could go on the copywriting principles, but to back up and actually answer your question, I would say there's 2 or 3 things here. So I think I call it the 4 P's of a high converting offer. And so it's person, pain, promise, price. Right. And so that's how you write a great book, is know those 4 things. And the good news is it's pretty similar to what you would think through when you're writing a sales letter. So who's the person? The ideal avatar is what I call it, that you're writing to. And this is where I would start. I would start with, and this is a writing tip, because a lot of people are, they're trying to figure out what's my voice? Like, am I serious or am I funny? Should I use stories? Should I not? And so my advice is to think of one person, your ideal avatar or your ideal reader, sorry. And this is one person that you actually know. This is not an avatar. This is a person that you actually know. And so say that is you, Roy. It's like, all right, well, I'm writing this book to Roy. And so then I'd start with chapter 1 and I'd say, and this is like an extreme example, but you can totally do this. Dear Roy. Yeah. And it's a letter. And then if I want to, whenever I ask like, oh, should I use this story or not? Well, would that resonate with Roy? Should I be serious or funny? Well, how would I talk to Roy about this? Right. And so every time all your questions get answered, and that helps you write a better book faster, is writing specifically to one person. And so then that's the person piece. And then I would go, and then I can go into more detail on the other stuff, but then what's the pain that they have that they know that they have, and what's the promise or hook of the book. Right. And so just as an example, this book that I just launched, published, The Proven Path from Blank Page to Published Author. I mean, you can kind of see that, right? Like what's the pain is the blank page and that evokes some emotion. And then what is the promise is, what's okay. This is becoming a published author and 10,000 copies sold. That's kind of like, so it's like a dual promise.
Yeah. And the secondary pain in there that you speak to well without making it the whole focus is that fear of, the fear of like, time. I'm going to put this out and nobody is going to read it. Yeah. And so you take it all the way through to that 10,000 copies sold. So I want to go backwards a little bit that speaking to a specific person, that's like a copywriting tip that I use. And in fact, I say, write an email to somebody, like write an email to that person, that specific person, because there is a certain casualness and choice of language and just a certain feel to what that conversation looks like. And it also happens to be immensely readable writing. And I'll tell you, this is me being spoiled by the simple language of copywriting and how good copywriters have to take complex ideas and present them at like a 5th to 7th grade level. Right. But I recently read a book that was incredibly interesting, or I started reading a book that was incredibly interesting. And the person, their writing was just so academic that I couldn't even get through the book. And so there is a virtue. You are honoring your audience's time and you're honoring their attention to actually make it very readable. And one way that you can do that is exactly what Chandler is saying, which is just write like you're writing to a friend, right?
Yes.
Not over the top.
Talk.
Yes. Yeah. So I personally actually have, I could write dozens of books, right? And I keep contemplating, okay, what's my next book going to be? I keep contemplating that. And so with so many ideas out there, you have some ideas on how you actually choose the book, because if you want lead sales referrals from your book, if you want a book that's going to get the right audience and bring them in, how do you choose which book to write?
That's a great question. So I look at, there's probably one of 3 camps people listening or watching. So either I have an idea, so I know what I want to write about. I'm not quite sure what I want to write about, or I've got way too many ideas. And it sounds like, Roy, you're in the too many ideas camp, and a lot of people are in that same camp. And so I kind of break this down in let's see, this is the I think it's chapter 4 of my new book. So it's the what to write about, but I talk about specifically is there's 3 questions to ask. Gosh, I got a lot of thoughts I want to share here. So 3 questions I ask. Question number 1, which one can I finish the fastest? So you have the most life experience or content on this topic. Now, a lot of times it's a bit of a dichotomy, because sometimes people are thinking about what to write about, and there's this easy book that they could write, but they're thinking in their head, gosh, I'm so tired of talking about that. Like people ask me that all the time, and I'm tired of talking about it. Well, the best way to stop talking about it is to write a book about it and then point to that book. And say, hey, just grab this book. It'll answer all your questions on that. So that's what this is for me, is kind of a drop the mic on the publishing process and how to do it. So you got, all right, which one can I finish the fastest? Question number 2, kind of similar, but different. Which one am I most likely to finish? So not only am I going to get started, but I'm going to actually get a rough draft done. And then question number 3, which one's going to make me happy? Like, which one am I going to enjoy writing? Now, sometimes for the business owners in the audience, I will switch that question to which one is closest to revenue. Because I found that revenue generally makes business owners happy. So that's the answer to that question is kind of one and the same. Maybe it's a little bit different, but so those are the three questions that I would ask. And then just very practical, I would think as close to the sales process and the customer as possible. And because there's probably already, if you're, whether you're doing client work, whether you're running an agency, whether you're, running a business, like whatever that looks like, there's conversations that you have on sales calls or on onboarding calls that would help grow your business if you had that documented into a book that you could use with new clients and new prospects. So that's kind of my thought process on how do you choose which book to write first.
Well, one of the things that I think of in the context of marketing in general is your job is to help the buyer go through the buying decision-making process. So like classic selling hard close, like people are more and more turned off to that. And they want to self-educate through that decision-making process. And especially when it's something more complex, some more complex topic or process or service or whatever, they want to self-educate through the decision-making process to a point where they feel comfortable making a decision. And there's an old adage of the more you tell, the more you sell. And there are, of course, negative reactions to long copy, right? That, oh, who reads all that copy, right? Who reads that super long sales letter? And in fact, Brian Kurtz at Titans of Direct Response talked about how long the sales letter was. Who reads all of it? Well, all the people that showed up, right? But if you want to disguise that, and I know that there's also the negative, and we can maybe speak to this, the negative connotation of, oh, this person just gave me a sales letter in the form of a book. Like some people have that negative reaction, but people almost never complain about, oh, this book is full of really useful information. And now I trust this author to guide me to whatever outcome the book was about. So if they're interested in learning how to become a published author and they read this and they say, oh, Chandler actually gave me a lot of good information here. And there are some next steps in here that I can take, which might include investing in some self-publishing school stuff. Like it's a very natural sales process where you've just helped someone through that buying decision-making process with the goal of the ultimate outcome being, hey, they could go through this and self-publish, right? Or they could go through this and decide, I want a little bit more help along the way. And honestly, I've done both, like depending on whatever the service is or outcome is I'm trying to achieve. I don't know if there's a question in that. So I guess what's your response? We've spent a lot of time here talking about the book can be an effective sales letter for services, whatever. What is your response when somebody has that complaint, or do you get that complaint about your books very much, acknowledging that you're both providing a bunch of value and giving people next steps?
Yeah, I think sometimes people complain about it. I mean, oftentimes those are the people who are going to find something to complain about no matter what.
That's fair.
But I think it's very important though, because I think it's a spectrum. There's a spectrum of, okay, this is just a glorified sales pitch and it has no real meat, substance, or content. In that case, I think readers have every right to be upset. That's the experience, right? And then there's the other end of the spectrum where this is either overly academic or unbelievably helpful, and it would actually be in the reader's best interest to work with that person to implement, but there is no direct connection or way to do that. And so that, in my opinion, is both ends of the spectrum are a disservice to the reader. And so that's where I think I like to land on the end of the spectrum, which is tons of value and very clear about how to work with us further. And so, this is kind of the classic, if you give away all of your best stuff for free, people will pay you to tell it to them again. And so so that's what I'd really do in my book. It's a 10,000 foot view. And it's the first step in the value ladder. You were talking about the value ladder earlier. So it's the, there's the instruction manual, there's the how to, and then there's the do it for me. And so I feel like the instruction manual is the book. So teach me how to do it. And then if you want to do it with me, like that's self-publishing school. And then we have done for you options as well. But that is kind of the ascension, but I want to be as clear as possible that, all right, if you just buy this book, and I've had I've had, because the first edition of this book was, downloaded and sold at least 100,000 times, maybe hundreds of thousands of times over the last few years since the first edition. And I have so many people come up to me and say, I read your book and I published my book. Like I didn't even work with self-publishing school. That's amazing. Because that means that this book on its own is inherently helpful. But I feel like I did a poor job of directly connecting it with self-publishing school. And so with the second edition, I said, there's a few objectives. How do I make this book way more valuable? So it's just drop the mic on this topic and is the definitive best book for the topic. And then secondly, how do I, that reader to subscriber or reader to paying customer, how do I improve that ratio? And so doing very direct, direct stuff but without it feeling like just a sales pitch the entire time. That's what I feel like I was really intentional about. And obviously only if you're watching this will you see this, but there's little things that we do. Like there's a video summary at the beginning of the book. There's an audio book at the beginning of the book given away. And then there's even something as simple like when I wrote the first version, we didn't even have a sales team. So there was no call to action in the entire book about booking a call with my sales team. And so, put that in the front of the book. There's just little simple things like that so that the right people who say, hey, I want more help, they have the opportunity to do that. And then everyone else, it's an unbelievably helpful book and it stands alone as a quality product.
To be fair, as you're flipping through, it's like 98%, 99% of the content is content. So like you just highlighted this and that's, I mean, just one last little hit on those negative reviews. Like oftentimes I'll see those reviews on a book that I just got a ton of value out of. And I'm like, what? Yeah. Like I got a ton of value out of this. Well, I don't understand what this person's problem is. And it was not a slight on your book at all, right? So I guess the focus there is focus on your core audience, focus on delivering value, focus on making the most value possible inside the book for the people who are ready to implement. And then for people who want a little bit of help implementing, give them a next step too. That's that's complete direct response. The best marketing today is value first. Like it delivers some value, gives you some takeaways, and then, there's an offer, so I can do more, right? So let's pivot before we reach the end of our time here. Let's pivot towards, okay, I have a book, and how do I launch it successfully? And I want to talk a little bit about like before, during, and after, because a book launch is not like, I wrote it, it's like I click publish on Amazon, and the world starts beating a path to my door. So can you speak to kind of that launch process and some important takeaways?
For sure. So it's exactly what you said is how I look at it. So I look at there's in the creation of the book, how do you set it up to be marketable? And then how do you actually execute and run a launch of the book? And then how do you sell books after you launch? So there's kind of like three distinct phases there. And so, but for the purpose of this question, because we've already talked about really a lot of stuff in phase one, is how do you launch successfully? And so as we record this right now, and as I know this episode goes live this week as well, I'm in the middle of the launch right now. So this is very top of mind. And so I look at, in the book, I talk about, there's two different chapters. So there's the MVP launch and the traditional launch. So I look at MVP as minimum viable product. And so what is the kind of the best bang for your buck? And then there's the traditional launch, which is kind of some more traditional tech. Like if you've seen a traditional book launch, you've seen this, but there's a lot of very specific stuff that actually works. And so I look at it as how much time do you have? How much resources do you want to dedicate to this? So it's like kind of time, energy, resources, and it's a sliding scale. It's not like a binary decision of like, but a sliding scale of, all right, I'm going to land somewhere on that spectrum. But then there's another concept. It's called the launch triangle. And so these are really the three things that you need to do to launch well, no matter the launch that you choose. And that's you need a launch team, you need to get reviews, and you need to have promotions that sell books. And so so a launch team is a small group of people that support the book. These are folks who get a free copy of the book ahead of time, and they read the book and leave a review on day one. So it could be 15 people, 50 people. Right now I've got it's bigger than most launch teams, but I certainly didn't go all out for it. And so it's about 150 people.
Okay.
And that's already led to a lot of reviews for the book kind of leading up to the launch. So that's the launch team. Then, I mean, that is not the only way that you get reviews, but is a significant way that you get reviews, but just focusing on reviews.
That's how you get momentum on
yes.
reviews. I mean, yes.
Yes. It's a big part of the momentum for reviews. And then the third piece is promotions. And this is the big part, that kind of sliding scale. And so that can scale up or down. And so this is, influencer campaigns. This is virtual book tour, which is, live streams and podcast interviews and all that stuff.
What we're doing right now, right? Like
yes.
This is an example of a virtual book tour.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the week the book is coming out, you probably are exhausted already from from podcast interviews. But because of our connection, you had sent me a copy of the book, and to be fair, he sent me a free copy of the book, right? Yeah. But he didn't even ask. Like, I guess there's a letter that says, "Oh, if you'd like to do any of these things related to it, that would be awesome." But he didn't say, "Hey, Roy, can I be on Breakthrough Marketing Secrets?" But I knew that, Titans, right? So Titans, like, let's get together and let's talk about this, because I know it's valuable. And I've seen your work at Self-Publishing School. And so, so you're doing this virtual
Let me just underscore
tour.
That real quick, Roy, because I think this is important. And this is my kind of philosophy across the board, is add value first. So kind of circling back to your question about the how do you structure the book? And so add a ton of value in the book, and people will be so blown away that they want to work with you. Similar to this is I wanted to send you a copy of the book because I thought you might like it. And the thing that I hate is when people do that and then they just pester you for weeks on end trying to get you to promote the book. So it was very much like there was a letter along with the book that says, "Hey, there's absolutely no obligation, but here, if you want to, here are 3 specific ways." So I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for the other person to help. So it's podcast interview, it's post to social with a copy of the book. And then I think the third one is I'll do a giveaway of books to your audience. And so something super simple like that to make it easy for people to support and contribute.
And by the way, for these people you're sending it out to early, having this pretty packaging where you got it, and it was actually wrapped in tissue paper for best result, read the book. Yeah. Like, I do have to give you props for that, because it lands with a thud. Like, it's got thud factor. It's a book, but it's well packaged and presented. It has a great box opening experience.
I appreciate that. All the credit of that goes to my team. So I appreciate
teams are important. That's great. So after the launch, I do want to speak briefly to the idea of so this is launch week for you, right? Yeah. This is launch week for you. There's a lot going on. You have the concept in the book of a 1-year launch.
Yeah.
So for the next year, there's going to be a lot more going on. Can you speak to how you are going to use this book over the next year to achieve much more success for the book and for your business?
No doubt. That's such a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. So, the 1-year launch, chapter 22, and then I'll go into 4. So I look at this as so one-off promotions are helpful, but how do you turn one-off promotions into evergreen assets? And really long-term book success is building assets that will sell books month after month, year after year. And so it's kind of this interesting dichotomy, because right now I'm in launch week. And so, yes, I'm as much as possible focusing on how do we move books this week, but then kind of with that counterbalance of, and whenever possible, how can I create an evergreen asset that will be a part of the 1-year launch and sell books 6 months from now? And so for me, things like this podcast interview will live forever, or as long as it's hosted. And so that will continue to bring back people into self-publishing school and selling books. And so then it'll also be, my plan is to do about 25 podcast interviews per month for the next few months. And so I'll keep doing that. And then we'll keep building we'll build it into funnels. We'll scale Amazon ads. We'll do a lot of those things, but really the whole concept is building one bridge at a time. And so one evergreen asset, then move to the next. And that is really what I believe is the secret to long-term book sales, is continuing to promote the book and then building assets that continue to sell books.
I have a really good metaphor for this, and I think it's really appropriate. So we think of the mighty Mississippi River as this gigantic river, but if you actually look at a map of the Mississippi and all its tributaries, it starts with all these tiny little streams, and they join together and they form the Platte River and the Missouri River and a whole bunch of other rivers in places where I'm not as familiar with them. And they join all these, and then eventually they, at St. Louis, it's like they all come together, and then boom, there's this mighty Mississippi. And so like every interview is like a little tributary. And so over the course of the first year, you're really just adding tributaries, and you're finding ways to make that flow just grow and grow and grow. Cool. Well, one last tip or takeaway before we just wrap up. I know that you have something special for my readers. So is there any last question that I should have asked, or any last tip that you want to throw in there to just make this just a little bit more value, a juicy nugget before we wrap up?
The big thing I would say is, I think for a lot of people, writing a book is on the maybe someday list or on the maybe next year list.
Yes.
And so the two biggest excuses that I get are I don't have time, or the timing isn't right. So my big encouragement for folks is, if you're thinking about doing this, like, the sad reality is for most people, maybe someday becomes maybe never, and they just keep kicking it down the road. And so I'd say you're going to have to get started before you're ready. And there's no better time than the present, because you're doing work once to create an asset that brings back leads, sales, and referrals forever. And so that's easy, and that's very top of my mind right now, because it's like, okay, I'm creating an asset that, I mean, this book, the first edition of this book, has brought in millions of dollars in sales for self-publishing school over the last 6 years or so since it was published. And I know that this book will hopefully bring in tens of millions of dollars in sales over the next 6 years. And so you're creating an asset, and you got to get started before you're ready. And my recommendation would be, once again, as soon as this interview's over, we'll grab a copy of the book, and I'll tell you about that in a second. I got a free copy for you, but actually work on the mind map and just spend 15 minutes and just mind map ideas, and you'll realize you got a whole lot more you can write about than you think.
I'm a huge proponent of mind mapping, and just that idea of writing down the main topic and setting a timer, like set an appointment with yourself. I'm going to show up. I'm going to spend 45 minutes just brainstorming into a mind map. And then you have the start of your book. That's awesome. Cool. Yeah. Okay. So you just mentioned, hey, you're going to give away some free copies of this book. And am I like, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but am I going to have to pay shipping? Like,
no. Okay. So I've got we set something up for your people, Roy. So it's the first 50 people will get a free physical copy of the book. And this is a free plus no shipping offer. So you don't have to pay shipping. You don't have to pay handling. We will print it, pack it, ship it to your doorstep completely free. So all you have to do is go to publishedbook.com/Roy. So published book, like I published a book, past tense, publishedbook.com/Roy. And as long as it's there's the form there is live, then that means there's still free books to give away. And so first 50 people, we'll give you a free copy of the book.
And am I right? Just to be clear, because I do have an international audience. This is US only, right?
Yes, this is US only.
Okay.
Yep, correct.
So it is worth it to find
international folks. We will send you a free. Just reach out to my team. We can send you a free PDF of the book. We can send you a free audiobook. Like, we'll hook it up.
Okay, so you're being generous. That's awesome. It's worth it, even if you buy it, it's worth it. Okay, people, like it's worth it if you buy it. But for the first 50 people in the US, they can fill out that form at publishedbook.com/Roy, get a free copy of the book shipped to them. I will ask, like, please don't just do this because you're a freebie seeker and you want to put it on your bookshelf, right? If you are serious about becoming a published author, and you're the type of person who's going to follow the advice from the inside of this nice box that Chandler, his team made, that says 4 best results, read the book, and then you're going to act on it and start your book. That's the type of person that really needs to get their hands on this book. And so I want you to be an implementer. I talk about that all the time. If you're the type of person who's going to request this, be the type of person who uses it. And it is most often the people who show up and do the little work day after day, who are, becoming a published author and generating millions of dollars in sales from that point, that pivotal point of publishing that book. So Chandler, Thank you so much for being a Titan, for meeting me at Titans, for saying hi at Titans, and then for sending me this book and letting me share it with my audience. Thank you so much for being here and for the great interview.
Hey, thank you so much for bringing me on, man. I really, really appreciate you having me. I hope this was helpful.
Yes. And thank you to everyone who has joined in for another episode of Breakthrough Marketing Secrets. One last time, I'm Roy Furr, this Breakthrough Marketing Secrets. The links, as always, are in the description. Check out publishbook.com/Roy to grab your free copy and check out what Chandler is doing with Self-Publishing School and with the brand new second edition of Publish the Book. Thank you once again for tuning in to this daily episode of Breakthrough Marketing Secrets. Remember, check out the links with this episode for even more value. Now make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe, and engage in every way you can to keep this show going and growing and delivering daily value to you. I'll catch you soon for your next big breakthrough.